We'd like to welcome you to our Client Success webinar today. This is another one of our weekly webinar series. My name's Dave Blake. I'm the founder and CEO of Client Success, and I'm just thrilled to be here today as I usually am every Tuesday. And thrilled to welcome our special guest, Marley Wagner, who's a good friend of the company, just an amazing customer success and marketing professional. She's currently a digital customer success consultant. And what I love about Marley, other than just her personality and the friendship that she brings to the community, is that she brings this perspective of marketing and success together and brings them together to be one of the experts in digital customer success. So, Marley, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Dave. I'm doing so good. So glad to be here. Couldn't have said it better myself. Marketing and customer success are better together. So really excited to talk today about some of those strategies and how to create a true digital customer success strategy for your team.
Oh, I can't wait. Now, Marley, you're coming in from Denver, right? We're on opposite sides of the Rockies together.
Right? Just
Not
right
too
on the
far
other side of the Rockies.
Well, that's great to have you. And really excited about this topic because I think a lot over the years, we've kind of synonymously put together this concept of tech touch is digital customer success. Today, we're breaking down those stigmas and those kind of false thoughts and strategies and really helping people unravel what digital customer success means. So excited to be here. I'm going to work the chat and the Q&A, and I'll turn the time over to you to share your insights.
Thank you so much, Dave. And everyone watching, again, as Dave mentioned, would love for this to be a conversation. Dave and I were just talking as we got ready for this session. Every presenter has their own style. Some people like to just kind of go with it, run with it, and get out what they've got to say. I personally love to make it a conversation. So would love to hear questions, comments, what's worked for you all in the chat and the Q&A as well. So please throw those in there. Dave, thumbs up. You can see my screen now.
Yep, you're all good.
Perfect. When Dave and I were talking about the premise of this particular webinar, there are so many ways we could take the topic of digital CS, so many different things we could talk about. And we started to talk about, what's the difference between digital CS and sort of the older term of tech touch, if you will. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you may have seen some of my posts in the past about how I've removed the term tech touch from my vocabulary. Gives me kind of an icky heebie-jeebie vibe. So we're going to talk about how to not think of it as tech touch and think of it as a true digital CS strategy for not just your smallest customers, but your entire customer base. And that really starts with taking a look at your segmentation, tiering, and your engagement models for your customers. This pyramid on the left, I'm sure, is just so very familiar to everyone on this call, so much so you may not want to look at it. And I really agree with that. I think, there was a time and a place for this pyramid model. Where, segmentation and that engagement model, the method in which you engage and interact with your customers was primarily driven by ARR. And ARR certainly has its place when determining how you're engaging with your customers, whether it's through humans, whether it's through technology. Of course, you need to stay within budgetary constraints. You need to make sure that your cost to serve your customers is kept at a reasonable level. You're not throwing away the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, when it comes to how you're utilizing your resources and what those resources cost versus the money that a customer is bringing in, excuse me. However, I really think we're going to start seeing more of a move from this pyramid style to, I don't know if it'll be this circle. This is how it helps me to visualize it, more of a pie chart, if you will. But there's going to be some new version of it. Hopefully it's mine. Maybe it's somebody else's. Either way, it's great. And the reason I like this circle model is because it implies a lot more movement than this pyramid does, right? This pyramid tends to be very stagnant, stay very still. When in the reality, your customers are going to be moving sometimes from one segment to another. The other really, really important thing is that I don't want customers to just be placed in a segment or tier or have a designated engagement model based only on ARR, right? As I said before, of course, budgets are super important. We can't ignore them. But there are so many things other than the revenue that your customer is bringing into your company that are going to inform your segmentation and therefore how you interact with them. These other things could be the product or products that they own from your company, could be the industry or vertical that they operate in. Certainly could be the potential for growth. This is an example I feel like I hear all the time, but if Apple or Microsoft just bought a teeny tiny, a couple licenses of your product, did they really not get to talk to a human? Maybe they're just beta testing, right? There should be a level of recognizing growth potential. And then the last one that really ties into what I do is customer preference. How does your customer want to talk to you? And I think when we ask this question, the thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is my small customers want to talk to a person. Well, okay, fair. And we need to put some limits on that. Again, back to our budget conversation. But what about the inverse? What about your enterprise customers? Do they want to have to call a person and get a hold of a person every time they want or need something? I can almost guarantee you that the answer is no, right? So rather than focusing on, oh, we need to limit human engagement for our small customers, I would really encourage everyone watching to think about how you can enable even your biggest customers, your highest touch, largest dollar value enterprise customers with self-service and digital. So I see some feedback on the pie chart. I'm all right if it doesn't end up being the pie chart, right? The dials are more important to me because it's all about kind of dialing up and down and being able to tweak as you go and make things available. So I
I
love
love
that
that.
feedback.
Marley, I was just going to say, so the way that, so it's all about having a mixture of both, figuring out the right strategy for the right customers and the right segments, but intermixing them when appropriate.
Exactly, right? There are some scenarios where your enterprise customers are going to need that digital engagement and want it,
Yeah.
right? Versus, yes, there should be an opportunity for your teeny tiny customers to raise their hand and say, hey, I really need to get a hold of a person. There needs to be that level of flexibility. And so I like the knobs or levers. I've seen it as like a slider or even a teeter-totter. I love, playground references. I have a 2-year-old, so those resonate really hard with me as well.
That's great.
So, thinking about however we visualize it, whether it's pie chart or something else, regardless of where your customers fall in your segmentation, how many high volume customers you have versus those higher dollar value, really there are some fundamental, I would call them prerequisites that need to be done before you actually start building a digital CS program or initiative. These things might seem obvious, but I have helped a lot of companies build programs like this, and you would be shocked at the number of companies that have skipped these things, thinking, oh, of course, assuming they're done or assuming they're not important. And so I really wanted to highlight, I call them pre-projects. Again, think of them as like the prerequisites to even sending your very first email. Number one, that is starting to build that relationship with marketing. Dave, as you mentioned, I do come from a marketing background before I fell into this wonderful world of customer success back in 2017. And so I just see so much opportunity for marketing and CS to help each other. I think in customer success, we talk a lot about the relationship between CS and sales, and how there needs to be, an effective handoff, how they're on the same team. I feel so deeply the same way about marketing and digital CS. They need to be like besties. They just need to be so tight, because otherwise you end up in this conflict scenario. And a certain amount of healthy tension is fine. But I want to see more companies avoid conflict and avoid duplicating efforts and stepping on each other's toes and confusing customers. So I would really, really encourage anyone who is even has an inkling that they're going to start building out digital, go have a coffee chat with your friends in marketing. Understand what their goals and KPIs are and share with them what you're working towards, right? A lot of times, even if you think of companies that have both customer marketing and digital CS, customer marketers are often focused on advocacy as an end goal, whereas digital CS leaders are more focused on retention and churn and expansion. Share that with each other. Understand where the differences and similarities lie. There are also so many ways to help each other. Have a brainstorm session. What do those look like? And identify those areas of potential overlap so that you can avoid future conflict, avoid stepping on each other's toes, avoid sending repetitive messages to customers, and as well as the flip side, the inverse of contradictory messages. Both are equally as important. Your customer is going to be just as annoyed with you if they read 2 emails a day apart that say the same thing but look different and are from the same company, but don't actually feel like they're from the same company. They're going to be just as annoyed as if you get those 2 emails that say 2 different things from the same company. So really work together, understand those areas of overlap or potential overlap to avoid that in the future. And if you, especially if you're not lucky enough to have a CS platform like ClientSuccess in place yet, understand what tech stack your marketing team is using. Of course, ideal state, you're using a purpose-built customer success platform to build digital CS, but the reality is sometimes at the very beginning, that's not possible. So understanding their tech stack can be really helpful in that as well.
Marley, I love this because I feel like that a lot of times the kind of the old school way of thinking about it is marketing is the sales partner. Only there for sales. And I think that now we should be establishing these relationships across all of our peers, but being able to align and have those shared goals and KPIs and be able to learn from each other and take the experience from each other to a common goal is really critical.
Absolutely. The other thing that I find critical that I see very few companies doing is creating a company-wide customer communication inventory. Again, before if you're building digital CS, before you build an email, before you even build a journey map, which I'll get to in a second, I want you to document every single message, whether it's an email, whether it's an in-app notification, whether it's a chat bot, whether it's a Slack message, I don't care. Document every single message that is going to your existing customers, regardless of who within your company is sending it. Because that's the other thing you just mentioned, Dave. There are all these other partner organizations. And even though in CS, we're like, oh, we own the customer. Guess what? Most of those other orgs are also talking to your customers, right? Product is sending product release notes. Marketing is sending upsell campaigns. Salespeople are reaching out to grow accounts. The list goes on and on. If you have a dedicated education department, perhaps they're sending emails or messages to sell training courses. Whatever the case may be, you really need that inventory of every single thing coming from every single department. Every time I've done this, the list is way longer than anyone expects it to be. And then it totally reframes, hey, we thought we had nothing for a digital customer experience. The reality is we have stuff. It's just like super random. I call it random acts of marketing. It's just like throwing spaghetti at the wall. And so then instead of saying, hey, we need to create everything, it's really about, hey, we need to make what exists today more cohesive and add where the gaps are. So tons of things that need to be documented in that inventory. The purpose, like why are we sending it? The audience, who it's going to, is it all customers? Is it a certain persona? Is it a certain product line? Who's getting it? How is it being sent? Again, email, Slack, chatbot, whatever. What triggers it? What system and mechanism, data point, trigger it to send? And then who owns it internally? What team or person? Super important. From there, then you're able to really identify a proof of concept for digital CS. I love proof of concepts for digital specifically, also often called a pilot, sort of interchangeable terms in this context. I know there are slight technical differences, but it's really about proving if something works. right? We, as CS leaders, we have a hard time proving our value internally often. And so a proof of concept or a pilot is a great way to demonstrate the impact that digital can have in a relatively short period of time. So there are several steps. I have a whole article out there if you want to talk about a proof of concept specifically, but first you want to define the scope. Are we using a certain segment of customers for our proof of concept? Or are we using a certain phase of the customer journey? To our earlier conversation, I prefer the latter. We're saying, hey, let's prove this out for onboarding, for example, rather than just saying, hey, let's prove it out with our small customers. Then you're going to set the success criteria. What will it look like if this pilot or this proof of concept is successful in the long run? Of course, you want to build and run the test. What are the messages? Build them out, triggers, set them up in your system. And then it's all about measuring and reviewing. Are you measuring the right metrics, which we'll talk more about metrics in a minute as well? How are you measuring them? And at what cadence are you reviewing to then be able to refine, iterate, and present on the success of this proof of concept? So once you have these pre-projects done, these prerequisites, if you will, then it's all about really building that foundation.
Marley, can I jump in and ask a few
Please,
questions for the audience? So
please do.
going back to the last concepts around partnering with marketing, another Marley Riley, who's joined us.
Yes.
Um,
New friend to the other Marley. Hi.
that's right, Marley's. She's curious who you've seen as the best owner of the joint marketing CS initiatives, or if it's a tiger team situation, how does that play out? Any
Yes.
there? And I've got one more after that.
Such a good question. The answer is there's no right answer. It does not need to live in one specific place. However, what does need to happen is that both teams, both leaders, like whoever is the head of marketing and whoever is the head of CS, need to agree on where it lives, right? That's really my genuine perspective. I have sat in both organizations. I am actually looking to go back to full-time work for my consulting business right now, and I'm interviewing for roles that sit in both departments. So the answer is, it actually doesn't matter where it sits. What matters is that both teams have agreed on where it sits and who is the owner. And then yes, it does become a tiger team situation where you need people from both sides of that fence to be heavily involved. And there needs to be a really, really high level of communication across those lines.
That's great. Thank you. And Miles, our friend Miles, is asking the question, what are the guardrails to ensure that a digital customer success strategy really just doesn't become a marketing strategy? Meaning we're just selling to them and marketing to them, but we're really providing the value that a digital customer success strategy would bring. Any suggestions there about guardrails?
Yeah, great question, Miles. Thank you for that one. So you always have to come back to that North Star of the customer's perspective, just like we do in high touch customer success, right? When we're mapping a customer journey and determining what actions our CSMs are going to take, the same must be true for your digital messaging. Again, it's all about the customer's perspective and how they define value, providing that value. Of course, there will be points in the customer journey where you say, hey, the reality is we know XYZ data point is highly indicative of a customer who needs to expand, whether that's buy more licenses, buy a complementary product, whatever it will be. So it's not to say that you can never sell, right? CSMs sell sometimes. And so digital CS is going to sell sometimes. But again, the overarching theme there is just make sure you're always tying it back to what the customer is telling you they want and what they define as value, rather than what you internally as the vendor are identifying as valuable to them. There are more specifics I could get into, but that's high level, really, really important to avoid becoming just, upsell campaigns.
That's great. Excellent perspective.
Great questions, guys. Thank you. Keep them coming. So again, once we have those prerequisites complete, it's all about building a strong foundation. I think a lot of people think about digital customer success and they're just like, oh, it's just a bunch of emails. Like, it's fine, whatever, right? We can send some emails. And if you're doing that, then I would say that's tech touch, right? That's random acts of marketing. That's I don't know. It's just sort of happening and no one really knows why or what it's doing. But to truly be an actual digital CS program, digital CS strategy, it has to be both effective and efficient, right? I think we focus a lot on the efficiency of digital. Again, it's important to keep budgets in mind, but digital should not be used only to lower your cost to serve your customers. It should also be used to make your customer journey more effective, help you reach your goals by helping your customers reach their goals. In order to do that, you need these three things. On the surface, they sound kind of similar, so I'm going to explain what I mean when I say each one. You need a digital roadmap, which is like your departmental roadmap, if you will, from how you're going to get to where your current maturity level of digital customer success to where you're trying to go. Then you need your automation plan. You need to understand what humans are doing today or no one is doing today that needs to be automated. What does that contain? What are the tasks, the messages, the activities that need automation? And then you need your touch point map, which is similar to a customer journey map, but more heavily focuses on those individual messages and campaigns. Again, still remains from a customer perspective, includes customer actions, but then includes, hey, what are the campaigns or messages or automation that are running simultaneously? So these are the three foundational components of any strong digital CS strategy, again, to be both efficient and effective.
Marley, just a curiosity from your perspective. I know like when companies do journey mapping, it's like a massive project. It's like, a 2 day, 3 day offsite or whatever, where you've got a board and you're mapping it all out. Is this a one-time initial effort, or is this something that can just be built and sustained over time? Your thought about that?
It's both. In an ideal world, I do still like to get together in a room and use sticky notes
Yeah.
to build this touch point map. Even if you've been through a journey mapping process, you probably mapped your very high touch process. That's usually where companies start, is with like, hey, we're going to map the experience for our biggest enterprise customers because they're quote unquote the most important, right? The most valuable, if you will. And so even if you've already gone through that exercise, ideally you are still doing something similar with sticky notes on the wall for this touch point map. That being said, it can be done virtually with tools like Miro, for example. It also is something that should be maintained and tweaked and updated over time. It is not a static document, right? Your product is going to change, your customers are going to change, your competitors are going to change, the business environment around us all is changing all the time. And so it's a living, breathing document, right? That digital roadmap and the automation plan are a little more static, but that touch point map is very much living and breathing, always changing, should always be updated as you continue to evolve, because there's a lot of iteration involved in digital as well.
That's great. Simon asks us maybe a similar question for the touch point mapping. He's saying he's hard to find the right tool or format for that, and was wondering if there's any recommendations. That might be a whole webinar of its own. But any quick things? Is it like I said, is it a whiteboard with post-it notes? Is it mural? Is it or is there other tools that you can do that in?
Yeah, so again, I would say ideal world, you're in a room together with the giant, I never know what they're actually called, but like giant poster sized sticky notes, and then smaller sticky notes that you can move around and adjust. And you have I call it a customer swim lane, a human swim lane, and then an automation swim lane where you're saying this is who does what. And again, you're mutually agreeing. Having the right people in the room is also very important. If you're doing it virtually, I personally have had good experience with Miro because you can kind of mirror a similar like sticky note, moving them around. There are other tools. And then I know there are other tools on the market that specifically do this, that specifically are made for customer journey mapping. I will be very transparent that I have not tried any of those specific niche tools, but would love to hear if anyone has and likes them. And if anyone else has other things that have worked for them, please feel free to share in the chat as well. Great question, Simon. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, moving on. I mentioned email earlier and how that's a really common conclusion for people to jump to when they're thinking about digital. They're like, oh, emails. That's what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. That's a teeny tiny portion of what we're talking about. I don't know about everyone else, but my inbox is ridiculous. And it is not a very effective way to capture my attention.
That's true. Same with mine.
Yes. So whenever possible, I really like to think outside of email when it comes to digital. What does that mean? That my favorite, all-time favorite channel is in-app notifications and guides. You can use purpose-built products like Pendo or WalkMe for this. There are some CS platforms that do this natively. I've also seen some CS teams work with their product team directly because product, either already has this capability built in or it's on their roadmap as well, where it's being built natively into your product also. So there are different ways to go about this, but it's a super effective way to reach your customers. If you think about it, again, my past life, the marketer in me is like, okay, engaging with customers is all about meeting them where they are, reaching them where they are. Well, where do you want your customers to be? The answer is in your product, like, duh, right? So of course you want to engage with them there. Yes, you want them to use your product, but even your super users, there are things about your product that they may not know. So how can you help guide them to those? There also, every product has specific features that we internally know make the product stickier, right? If you're using XYZ functionality, we know that you're more likely to renew. Well, how can you get more customers to use that specific functionality? Right? So it's a super effective way to guide. I also especially love in-app for onboarding, getting a customer accustomed to living and breathing and doing their work in your platform. You can, email them to guide them into the platform, then have some in-app pop-ups and walkthroughs guide them through next steps. So that's one of my all-time favorites. Other things that we're talking about outside of email, things like community and even your knowledge base. Even better if that lives in the same place, and even that much better if support also lives in that same place. I love it when companies have community, knowledge base, support all on the same hub, especially if it's, again, right in your product, just like I was talking about with in-app. I really like community in particular because it's a nice way to incorporate some human to human interaction into a digital strategy, right? Community is all about one-on-one human engagements amongst other customers and between folks who work at the company, who work at the company and customers as well. There are community moderators, that kind of thing. So I like that level of human engagement and community in particular. This one is a little controversial, but interpersonal chat is becoming a more and more popular channel for digital CS. We see this obviously a lot in the B2C world. I don't know about you, but I love to shop, and every single, retailer's app that I have on my phone, sends me push notifications if I put something in my cart, but I don't buy it. Or if they have a coupon code, they send me text messages, they send me, emails. But there's so many other ways that they're communicating with me. And I think that is a lesson that B2B customer success and digital CS can learn. Of course, there's a line, right? We're not going to be sending push notifications to people's cell phones. But how do we translate that for a B2B audience? So things like automated Slack messages. I have had customers who say, I literally never check my email. If you want to get a hold of me, you have to Slack me. I will not read your email. So there are ways to automate that. WhatsApp is similar, especially in international markets. If you're a global company, WhatsApp is a little more accepted internationally than it is here in the US. as a communication channel. And even some companies, again, it's not appropriate for everyone, but sometimes some level of text message automation is appropriate as well. So when I say interpersonal chat, I don't mean just chat bots, support bots, or on your website, whatever, have its place. That's just not what I'm talking about here. And then
Marley,
last, oh, go ahead.
there was a quick question on that one. Sorry. One, Victoria is asking, who would manage those chats? Would it be the whole CSM team, just the individual CSM with their customer, or a manager? Any suggestions on that from the chat?
Absolutely. So again, let me clarify further. I don't mean an actual human on the other side of the chat. I mean automated interpersonal chats, right? So that would likely be one person on your digital CS team who is in charge of automation, including automating messages through Slack or WhatsApp or text message. I don't actually mean CSMs texting with their customers. They can do that. Absolutely, that's great. That's just not what I mean here. So yes, it should be one person who's setting up the automation, but it's not actually like a back and forth in that way.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that.
Absolutely, and good question, Victoria. The last channel, this one's in quotes, channel I want to talk about is video. Technically, it's not a delivery channel, right? You're creating a video, but then you have to send it via something else, right? You have to send it over email, or have it pop up in the in-app, or send it over Slack, or post it in the community. But video is so important that I really wanted to talk about it here. I will admit that I am personally the outlier who does not love to consume content via video. I would rather read it and look at screenshots next to it, right? If I'm going to learn how to do something, if I'm putting together my 2-year-old's toy kitchen, give me pictures and written instructions all day. My husband, on the other hand, like most of the rest of the world, would like to watch a video tutorial. That's how most people learn. And so video is such an important component of any digital CS strategy. By video, I mean a million things, right? This could look like 1-minute recorded Loom videos from your CSMs that just explain, hey, I've had a lot of questions about this topic lately, wanted to give a quick walkthrough of how to do this in the platform. This could mean long form training content, right, in the form of training and certifications, particularly if you have a more complex product. This can also mean micro learnings, little snippets of that long form content that is available in your knowledge base. This can mean things like animated video. There are platforms out there that will have a little cartoon avatar read out your QBR data to you, right? When I say video, it means a million different things, but it's so important to be thinking about how you're using video in any of the other channels that we just talked about, including email as well. So I really wanted to focus on it, even though it has a little asterisk up there.
Marley, there was a question on video specifically related to Loom, said that when you do you see video content via Loom or other tools part of it, which you confirmed, but how do you manage the complexity of keeping it current? Any suggestions for that?
Yes. When it comes to any kind of content, written or video, there is, of course, the dilemma of, hey, what do we do when this is no longer accurate, when this is old, right? When our product has changed, the functionalities or the features have changed, or even just the interface and the look. And so it's no longer accurate. There absolutely should be a person who is in charge, just like I talked about creating that inventory of existing communication at the beginning. There's someone who should be in charge of, it can be the same or a different inventory list, but you need to continue to update that communication inventory, right? When was the last date that it was updated? So you're able to then track, okay, we know the product changed and we have this piece of content or about that feature. We know that it needs to be updated. This does get complicated, which is why digital CS is not just like a one person throwing stuff at the wall kind of concept, right? Ideally, digital CS is an entire team within your CS organization. And again, sometimes some of those resources might live outside of CS. Maybe the person who's actually creating the content and keeping that inventory, maybe they live in marketing. Maybe it's a content marketer who is the one that is in charge of keeping the content inventory, identifying when they need to be updated, and communicating that to CS. That's okay too. But it is something that's a constant iteration. Just like we're going to be constantly iterating based on what's effective and what's not effective, you also, of course, need to iterate based on what's current and what's accurate information.
That's great. One best practice that I learned from our friends at Brainstorm, who provide a video enablement, that
Yeah.
a lot of companies use for their digital customer success strategy, was if you're going to do video content that will live for a while, break them up into smaller chunks. That way, if there's one aspect of it that becomes irrelevant, you can quickly replace it with a smaller replacement rather than having a video that's an hour long. You're doing it into smaller clips and chunks of 5 minutes, for example. That's easy to replace. So that might be something to consider as you build out video as part of your digital customer success strategy.
Absolutely. Love that. Love the guys over at Brainstorm doing great stuff.
So we've got a question. How do you persuade my organization that provides product information for users to help in increasing the product training? So I guess how do you convince your product and marketing team to engage in this digital customer success strategy? Any suggestions there?
That's exactly what I'm going to talk about next. So I'm going to go to the
Excellent.
next slide.
Lead in.
Mind readers in the audience. I love that. I want to talk about measuring digital CS and measuring the effectiveness. And this comes back to persuasion, right? And back to what I talked about prior of that proof of concept. It can be hard to get the resources that you need, especially when I'm saying, hey, you should have a whole team around this. That's really hard, right? It's hard to get the buy-in from your leaders, the budget to hire the right teams, all of that. And so you do need to continue to prove and persuade and demonstrate value and demonstrate impact as you're building this. So how I think about this is 4 levels of measurement. And that's how you're going to draw the line from the actions that you're taking, the campaigns that you're putting in place, all the way to the ultimate goals, which again, on the CS side of the house are usually around retention, churn, and expansion. Advocacy is sometimes included as well, but more focused on retention and churn in this particular context. So number 1, once you run a campaign, even if it's just your teeny tiny proof of concept, it is just a welcome email, right? Hey, we're just going to build a welcome email so that customers have everything they need in one place when they're first joining us. You're going to measure the engagement with that email, whatever the message is. If it's email, you're measuring open, click, bounce, and unsubscribe rates. Opens and clicks are really what are measuring your engagement. Bounces and unsubscribes actually go back to some foundational stuff of like, hey, do you have accurate contact information for your customers? Do they still work there?
Yeah.
All of that. So a little tangential, but also very important to measure. If you're using in-app, like we talked about, similar to email, you're looking at views and clicks versus folks who dismiss that pop-up message. And then anything video, you want to be measuring video view time. Even if it's just those short little snippets, like we just talked about, Dave, 2 minutes, let's say, did they turn it off after 20 seconds? That's going to give you some information. How are they engaging with the content that you're creating and pushing out there? From there, then you're going to measure based on the cohorts of customers that engaged with that content or did not engage with that content. And you're going to look at product usage. Metrics like time on platform or time since last login, that sticky feature usage that we talked about earlier. Hey, if we just ran a campaign to try to get more users to use that sticky feature, did that work? Are more people now using it if they saw that campaign? And then overall change in usage over time. If there are any changes in behavior, you want to just observe those patterns and be aware. And again, comparing, hey, this cohort of customers that engaged with that content versus the ones that did not. What are the differences in that product usage? Same thing as we go up. I never know what to call this category, so I'm going with intermediary measures because they kind of look different in every scenario.
Yeah.
I love suggestions actually from from the audience if you have a better name for this as I talk about it. But these are kind of chameleon metrics. Sometimes they can look like leading indicators, sometimes they can look like lagging indicators. I'm talking about things like time to onboard and time to value. Cost to serve certainly is a big one here. Sometimes certain survey scores, CSAT, NPS, or customer effort score can be appropriate to measure, as well as those advocacy signals, people who are raising their hand to speak at your customer events, or who are willing to provide testimonials. Those kinds of things are helpful signals. Again, not on their own, but as you compare those cohorts of customers, this cohort engaged with our content, this one did not. What are the differences in these metrics? Those are called squishy metrics. Sometimes they are kind of squishy, but they're helpful to get to the ultimate goal, which again is that retention and growth. Ultimately, if your digital CS program is effective, just like anything else in CS, then it's impacting net revenue retention, churn rates, and expansion revenue. And it's really hard to tie, hey, did this customer read this email to those ultimate metrics? Because it's a big, long gap. These things cannot physically be impacted until your next renewal cycle, number one. We're talking about retention and churn. Growth can be along the way, but retention and churn, you have to wait until renewal time. So you have to be able to kind of draw the line and slowly measure over time. And then once again, I'm a broken record. Of the customers who engaged with that content, do they have higher NRR? Do they have higher retention rates versus the customers that did not? So I hope that answers that question, but either way, really, really important to be measuring as you are building, as you are going through the customer journey, as your customers are experiencing this digital experience that you're building. How are you measuring these things along the way? And then how are you going back and iterating based on the information that it's giving you as well?
That's great.
Holistic metrics. Oh, I like that one too. Okay. Good suggestions, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm happy to answer any more questions if the audience has them.
Marley, this has been awesome. We do have a couple of questions. So the other Marley asks, like, where would you start? Is there, if you're a smaller team, earlier in the maturity model, is there one place that you would recommend starting? I know you built out the idea, but is there one kind of digital success that you would say start here and experiment there, and then build upon it?
Yeah, I would say start with what low-hanging fruit looks like for you and your company, right? I think a lot of times we think of digital and we think, oh, we're going to need so much data in order to have a good digital experience for our customers. Data is really important in the long run, but it doesn't mean you can't start somewhere, right? Oftentimes there are time-based scenarios where, hey, you know that your onboard time to onboard is pretty standard. Almost every customer takes 90 days. Well, guess what? Then you can trigger messages to be sent at 90 days. And if it's really off by a couple of days from when they're truly onboarded or truly live in your system, it's not going to be the end of the world. They're still going to get the gist of that. So again, look at what low-hanging fruit looks like for you, what you have easy access to, and what would be valuable for your customers. A really good way to do this is to look, if you have a high-touch customer journey that you've mapped, look at those touch points and say, which of these are like the most important to my customers, not to me, to my customers? And is there an easy way for me to automate a version of that today?
Yeah, that's great. We've got someone who's asking, would it be beneficial to communicate achievements to the end users as a way to underwrite the value of the product? As part of your strategy, digital customer success strategy, communicating the value to the customer and their users?
Absolutely. This is an awesome example of communicating value. I was just working with a client recently where we really heavily focused on this. Reporting on things like usage was not particularly important in this particular environment, but communicating, hey, you just hit your 1,000th XYZ, whatever metric we're talking about. That was a much better way to demonstrate value. I see Canva is the company that comes to mind for me, that they do a really good job of this. They have these like really fun, I don't know, certificates, if you will, when you hit a certain number of designs that you've created in the platform. Great way to encourage continued usage, great way to demonstrate value. There's also, that's for the individual user. It's also a great way to have a different version of that same message for an executive buyer, right? In this customer I was working with, it was about like protecting threats. They're a cybersecurity company. And
Yeah.
so that executive buyer is like, oh my gosh, this software just blocked the 1,000th whatever malware attack, whatever it may be. I don't know, I'm probably using the wrong terms. But that matters to that buyer. So having different versions of those congratulations for different personas, also a really great way to demonstrate value.
That's great. I love that. It's always great to be like rewarded or feel you're accomplishing
Yeah.
things as you're leveraging a product. It's very cool.
And it ties to what you, again, as the customer, are trying to achieve. It's not about you've logged in X number of times or you've spent Y number of hours on the platform, because the customer doesn't care. What did they achieve using it?
Exactly. We have one more question, and if there's any others, drop them in the Q&A. But we have somebody who's asking, have you found a consensus of which actions are more impactful when there are multiple dashboards or sources of truth? Kind of a hard question. Like, is there a best way to align on a single, a few, like a North Star metric, maybe is what I think a lot of people call them. Any suggestions of aligning to a North Star metric?
There is no one right answer because
Yeah.
your gut is never right.
Yeah.
Become best friends with your business intelligence team, your data analysis team, have them run regression testing, make a hypothesis about what those North Star metrics should be, about which channels are most effective, about, what that sticky feature is, whatever it is, make the hypothesis, but then ask your data team to run regression testing to prove that either correct or disprove it. I think in CS, this is a really big problem where we think we know our customers really well. I see this a lot when people are building health scores. We're like, we know what makes customer healthy. Uh,
You don't.
we don't. Data does.
Yes.
Use the data. Another, you should be friends with your marketing team, but maybe even more important to be friends with your data team.
There you go. There you go. Well said, Marley. Well, thank you so much, Marley. This has been awesome. I'm confident that all of our audience are walking away with some great tips and tricks and practical application to go and build their digital customer success strategy. So, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your passion. Marley, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you after this, where can they find you?
Yes, find me on LinkedIn. I know there is another Marley in customer success. She's here. We're besties now, but I think I'm the only Marley Wagner still. So I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for having me, Dave. Great to talk to you.
Well, thanks, Marley. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. We're grateful that you would take the time out of your busy schedules to join us. Um, Remember, if there's anything we can do at Client Success, the team at Client Success, let us know. It's www.clientsuccess.com. We're happy to help, whether through our product or through our best practices or just collaborating and maybe sometimes even commiserating with you. So, but this was a great thing. Remember, every Tuesday we have webinars. We are next week. We have another good friend of ours named Boaz Mayor. Excuse me. Boaz is going to talk about a controversial topic around NPS. And some people hate NPS, some people love NPS. We're going to talk about NPS, the metric that everybody loves to hate, and why you should like it. So join us next week, same time, same place. Between now and then, thanks for all that you do, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.